Well, happy Thursday, everyone. It is a lovely day here in June. It is getting a little bit warmer, but it definitely is. It is feeling like summer. A lot of nice green here in northern Indiana. I hope things are nice where you are. I know there are a lot of parts of the country where it is very toasty. But today we are going to be talking about the lift and shift and moving to the cloud. But before I get to that, just kind of our regular housekeeping details here on Tech Tips Live. We will try and answer any and all of your questions. So if you have them, use the Q&A functionality in the webinar, as well as when we get to the end, you can do that, but you can do it during the webinar also. We will be posting, we're recording this, we will post that recording to our YouTube channel here later in the week. And as always, we're always open to what your ideas may be for another Tech Tips Live topics. So we're always happy to hear about those. So I am Phil Mason, your host here today, and I have two people joining me as we kind of look at different perspectives on this idea of the lift and shift. And so I have Jen Micklick, who Jen also sometimes is sitting here in the host chair, but today she is one of our technical resources as one of our technical project managers, and Ian Harris. Thank you for the wave, Ian. Ian is coming to us from San Francisco, I think via Indianapolis, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
All right. Ian is one of our implementation specialists, and I know probably a lot of you have talked to him at different points on support calls perhaps, or as he's maybe worked on projects. We will be going through an introduction, and then we'll have some kind of questions. Today's going to be more of a dialogue, a little less specific, because the lift and shift does vary from company to company and situation to situation. So we're just going to talk about some of the things that you should be considering as you look at that. So first of all, why are people moving to the cloud from on-premise? We have a number of reasons here that we see commonly. First of all, one of them that's driving it, and even here at Hertzler, we're at this point where we've had a server and it's reaching the end of life, and so we are pretty actively moving a lot more of our storage to the cloud. As well, since our office has been closed for a number of months and we're working remotely, we are accessing a lot more cloud and remote apps as well. We are seeing a move to centralize IT resources in a lot of manufacturing companies. There are no longer oftentimes local resources, or maybe the local resources are outsourced. There is a centralized hub, and that cloud infrastructure helps to work with that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Software companies are also leveraging cloud advantages. There are things that for us are easier to do in the cloud. There are things that are a little bit more time consuming, a little more challenging as well, but it is part of the move is that a lot of work and new product development is going into the cloud, which is also pushing that. So we have a couple polls today. We're going to try and be a little bit more interactive on today's Tech Tips Live. So our first poll here, and last time I did this, I had a little challenge doing it, but I have now launched a poll here. So I think everybody should be seeing it. And just simple question there. I'd like you to kind of give us your idea. In the next blank years, I predict all of our software will reside in the cloud. And let's just kind of see if those of you who are on here with us today, what you think may be the case. So far, we have things split. I'm going to wait just a couple more seconds. If you haven't voted yet, get your vote in. Jen, Ian, did you guys vote?
Actually, it says that we cannot vote.
Oh,
so
shoot.
You can't sway anybody's opinion.
I guess I need that checkbox next time. All right. So here you can see we were pretty evenly split. Nobody's thinking that it's going to be coming up right, super soon, and that most a third, a third, a third. We've got a small group here today, but some of us think about 5 years, some about 10, and then there are others who are like, yeah, it's never going to happen, and we realize that is the case with especially some of our defense contractors and people like that. And even some of our work with companies like Gartner, they have become kind of less gung-ho of everything to the cloud to it's more of a hybrid world in the cloud. So we will have a couple more polls as we go. Just checking with Jen and Ian. Did the poll disappear now?
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
All right. I wanted to get it right this time. All right. So next up, Jen, when somebody starts planning for the cloud, we've got a few questions here. What you want to talk us through some of the considerations that companies need to think about when they're thinking about taking their GainSeeker they've had on the good old reliable servers locally, doing the lift and shift. What is it they need to think about?
Some of the things to think about is, in our case, we can offer hosted GainSeeker where you don't have to worry about the IT, you don't have to worry about any of that. It's all in one, right? We take care of it all. But there's others where you do have the IT resources and you might already have other softwares in the cloud already, and you want to use it that way. So it's, the hosting platform, whether you want to be in control of it or you want someone else to be in control of it. And not even just in the cloud environment. We've talked about a couple things of, locally, and it's here. If you think of, we had talked earlier, like Citrix or RDP. I mean, those are things that are not necessarily in the cloud, but it is a shift from being in a local environment. So that could be the case as well. So really, it's how much do the companies want to own, how much ownership in where the data resides, and we work with them.
Yeah, so RDP can be local. It can even be at a company's data center or AWS or Azure. Cell, I guess, would be more Azure with RDP, but they have an RDP service that you can buy from the cloud as well. So there are kind of even iterations of that. Ian, you have anything else to add in terms of hosting platforms?
No. GainSeeker is fairly platform agnostic, so I think that Jen covered it.
Okay, so Jen, now I've decided on a platform. I've picked that. How much do I need to buy? The cloud is awesome because it is an unlimited resource, and it's kind of like, think about it like a utility and a hose you can dial up and get more water out of. How do I dial up the correct amount of resources I need for GainSeeker?
Well, the first and easiest thing to say is if you don't have it right with these services, it's very easy, like a tap of your credit card, right? And, we can get more resources. And it really depends, if you're going to have a handful of users and we're doing manual data, we don't have to have as much resources as if we're going to tap into OPC servers or we're going and hitting local network drives. So it really depends on what they're doing as far as resources for that. And as well, that's on the slide here of the other resources we need to think about. Like for GainSeeker, we have the ability to work and send to PowerPoint and send to Excel. Well, when you're going on the cloud, you have to have licenses for that and make sure that they're available as well. If you choose to go with the hosted service that we have the ability to, okay, here's your licenses. We can put them in there or we can supply those. And the other thing to be considerate of is the SQL licenses as well. Mm-hmm. So those are things that have always just kind of been the IT's consideration. They had it now with the lift and shift, depending on who's being responsible for those. We have to keep that in mind as well.
So that is that concept there of the bring your own license. If you have an existing SQL license, depending again on versions and things like that, you can often transfer that directly to a cloud type of a setup. And there are also some different nuances there in how that works. But Office, those kinds of things, those can be included with a hosted kind of an environment.
Yeah, and that actually brings us to the next topic on that licensing difference is, GainSeeker locally, it's concurrent licenses. You have a pool of 20 when someone uses one and then they get done, that license goes back into the pool. Or with GainSeeker, that's still the case. But going to the cloud environment, everybody's logging in as a named user. So when we talk about pricing and how many users for the cloud, we have to make sure that we keep that separate from the GainSeeker.
Yeah. So our users in a cloud environment or hosted environment is going to be more one-to-one. You have 50 people who may touch it at some point, want to have that application on their desktop. You need 50 links to that location in the cloud. Once you get into the GainSeeker, then it's to the concurrent pool, right?
Right.
Cool. All right. Excellent. Well, that brings us to our second poll here, and I checked the box so panelists can vote this time.
Uh-oh.
And here we're looking for, what right now, as you're operating today, what percentage of your applications would you say are in the cloud or not? So what mix, I guess, is how I would put that. Okay, just about got everybody. There, we got everybody. Okay, so again, broad range, or at least kind of the range in the middle. Nobody at the extremes. Nobody saying 100% cloud, 100% local. We have the two kind of on the edge of things, with 3/4 in the cloud or local, and then a couple people here at 50-50. So again, pretty broad adoption if we think about things in the big picture. All right. So Ian, you want to talk a little bit about, well, I think maybe you and Jen are going to go back and forth here, but what are some of our transition concerns? I think, Jen, you're going to talk about this whole idea of, okay, if we're going to do a lift and shift, how much of our data are we going to bring along with us?
Yeah, I'll let Ian go ahead. I mean, these are things that we all need to talk about. Sorry, easier said to talk about. So.
Yeah. Okay. So generally speaking, I mean, this. I guess I'll just go in order on according to the slides. So when we talk about moving the data from one place to another, it's several questions. One is, how much do you want to move? Some companies need to keep data for 1 or 2 years. Some need to go back 10. And it also depends on how accessible it needs to be. There are several companies that we work with who need to have the data, but never access it. They just need to have it in case something happens. So they might keep the backups on-prem or somewhere else, and then be working with the live database wherever their actual system is. So I mean, it's one of the considerations is just how much are you going to move. And when we talked about replicating the database structure, I mean, are you just going to essentially drop it from one server and attach it to another one, or are you going to make any changes when you move it? And that's kind of going to depend on how in the cloud you want to be. We know that, for instance, right now we can have a GainSeeker installed on local machines and be using a cloud-based database. So a database in AWS, but it's installed on my laptop, that kind of thing.
So really,
so
that's more of a hybrid approach.
Yeah, exactly. That's more of a hybrid approach, and it's the even if you plan to be completely in the cloud at some point, I think most people are going to be doing a hybrid approach at some point. It's kind of unlikely that you're just going to stop everything local and then start doing everything remotely and it'll just work. So we're probably going to, you know, step our way there. And so that's a decent way to get there, is put the database there first and then put the file server there and then put the application there and start serving it. As far as, you want me to talk about the self-managed or hosted too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so when we talk about this, what we're talking about is whether we, Hertzler, are going to be involved in actually managing your GainSeeker installation, which is not a thing that we currently will be doing, I think, for anybody here, or if you are going to be in charge of that, basically. So we were using a service called V2 Cloud, and with V2 Cloud, we have the ability to sort of be the IT support for GainSeeker. So we would create your, probably create your GainSeeker users. We would certainly be creating and managing your pool of V2 users. So this would be sort of like your AD user pool, which would be how many licenses you have to connect to the cloud service at all. And V2 typically serves the same way that Citrix does. So it's sort of like a shop front. You do install a desktop application if you want, and then you can just run the actual GainSeeker application from that, or you can run GainSeeker from a web portal, or you can also use an RDP. So they'll create an RDP shortcut that'll let you bring along your maps drives and your COM ports and your whatevers. It's an RDP connection. It works just like a normal RDP connection does. So that would be what the turnkey service is. If somebody wanted to do a lift and shift where you just take your on-prem stuff and put it in the cloud, but you don't really want to mess with managing it right now, we would use V2 Cloud to do that.
Okay, very good. I think we'll talk a little bit more about auditing the GainSeeker data sources and kind of data movement as it's going, as we go on in the other slides. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Ian, before we do move on.
No, I was thinking the same thing, that we could probably just handle it in a bit.
All right. So then,
like, how about here?
Yeah, so you know, we've made a choice. We're going to move. We've made some of those choices, and now we're going to start operating. And so, what are we going to see that's actually different? What are some of the things that, as we're actually operating, we need to really kind of stay aware of and stay on top of?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the big benefits is that depending on how in the cloud you are and how not hybridized you are, the performance might actually improve. Because if you are dealing with systems that are only replaced when they absolutely have to be, like something broke and it caught fire, and so fine, we'll get a new keyboard. If that's sort of the situation that you're in, you're probably going to be dealing with a lot of things that are sort of duct taped together, and they might not work as well as you would like. Once they're in the cloud, though, basically they'll work as well as you pay for. Companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft have obviously got the latest equipment. So if you want something very, very fast, it'll be very, very fast, which is really neat. So if you have everything in the cloud, the interconnectivity is going to be basically perfect. The potential issue you're going to have is the same issue you would currently have connecting to the internet, which is, what if the internet disappears? Or if you are on a shop floor and it's a large floor and it's full of metal and you're using Wi-Fi, maybe don't use Wi-Fi because it's going to make it difficult to connect repeatedly. Although the nice thing about this is, since we're talking about GainSeeker, even if you have GainSeeker installed locally, it still needs to be able to access your network in order to work. So if it's working now, then probably local conditions like being on the floor or being in a specific room aren't going to affect it any worse than they currently do. So you'll just be looking at the connection from your building to Microsoft or to Google Cloud or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
It is interesting though,
Yeah.
you know, as we get more and more cloud applications. The other afternoon, I lost my internet service. Well, I guess actually, I'll take that back. I lost electricity. But, you know, you lose them both. But I was down for 4 hours, and
Yeah.
laptop battery only goes so long, you know, text processing, some of that, and I could use my phone and still do some things. But yeah, you know, and again, if any manufacturing plant, if you're out of power, well, it's all shut down anyway. But that internet, that connectivity is an important part of cloud applications.
Yeah, definitely. Also, one of the things that one of the ways the connectivity comes into play is with COM ports or USBs or keyboard wedges or whatever. There's a lot that goes on between GainSeeker and other applications. It's one of the main strengths, and something that we really push is that it can be made to do a lot of things and you know, work with your workflow. So if you have a CMM that's spitting out CSV files, we can read those in as long as we know where they are on the network. If you have a gauge that's sending something in via USB or via COM port, we can read that in. And if you're using RDP, if you use RDP, then you know you can forward basically everything. So as long as you have the drives that you're looking for mapped and you have the COM ports mapped, you can forward the drives and forward the COM ports and forward USBs. So you should be able to just use it the way that you're using it now. The one thing to be aware of is that if you are reading from a local drive, instead of just reading from that mapped drive, you're going to be going out to a remote machine and then coming back and gathering it. So like if I share my W drive with the RDP connection, I'm going to go out and then come back and get stuff from my own drive and then go back out again. So it's going to add a little bit of time. Probably not that much, maybe like a second. Communication links with other software. So things like, you know, Microsoft Office, if you're in the cloud, it's not that special. You're probably running Windows. So you should be able to communicate with other things that you're using like Office or Minitab if you're exporting things to Minitab because you want to get their graphing capabilities, or importing things from Minitab or Excel. As long as you have the licenses all in order and you have them installed on that computer, just like a normal one, it should be fine. Connection timeouts, this is just, you know, when you're trying to do something and the internet sort of blips. And I think this probably falls into the same category as the one a couple bullet points up, where just your internet connectivity is going to play a role. And it's slightly different place now. Instead of being between the client machine and your own in-house server, it's now between your setup and Azure.
I think the other thing I'd throw in there, Ian, is we've seen some places where IT has set, for security reasons, a login timeout and things like that. And when you are going to the cloud or you're doing an RDP and you get that log out and then you come back, sometimes you have a suspended session. You sometimes get the COM port reassignments and just there's just things to be aware of that happen differently than a local machine.
Well, actually, the good news about that is that the COM port shouldn't be reassigned. So when you, the COM ports will be dynamically reassigned maybe if you like unplug something and plug it back in. Okay. But because you just forward your COM ports to the you know, whatever cloud system you're using, that should stay the same. So it'll be whatever it is on your machine. Okay. Which is good. The thing that you really want to watch out for is for heavily customized inspections and templates, because again, GainSeeker can do a lot, and we allow you to actually do a programming or to do several programming languages. And sometimes you get templates that access like 50 different files every time you run something. So it goes out and pulls a spec list, and it goes out and pulls a history, and then it does something else. And that's fine. But if you've ever dealt with something that uses mapped drives and then you lose the drive mapping, you are aware of the pain of trying to A, track down where that was coming from, and B, figure out everything that needs to be remapped. So when you move, we will definitely have to take a look at, or you will, someone will, at the you know, what's going on in the templates and inspections that you use all the time, and make sure that you're not going to lose your ability to communicate and get all the way through it. Because the last thing that we want is to move you to the cloud and then no one can use it anymore.
Yeah.
The whole point is to be very convenient. So that's one of the reasons that if you are thinking about it, we very much recommend that you like call Jen or call your account manager and basically work through exactly what's going to need to happen so that we can tell you, or at least so that we can arrive at an idea of how complicated it's really going to be. Do you have to, change a bunch of stuff or not?
Yeah. So perfect segue there into our next slide. and we are,
like I've seen these.
We're running down on time here, so I'm gonna run through these quick. So we're curious, for those of you who are on our webinar today on Tech Tips Live, what are some of the things that you see that the cloud makes you nervous about moving your shop floor applications? And maybe you're not, but curious to see what are some of the things that, and you can have multiple answers here. We'll give you a few more seconds, and then going to kind of have the inverse question there of what excites you about maybe moving to the cloud. And then I think, yeah, like Ian started, we have our, what are some of the things to start the discussion about moving? All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and end this one and show us. So internet down is kind of one of the biggest things that makes people nervous. Some nervousness about potentially the performance, and then the scattering of kind of your typical other issues with potentially moving to the cloud. So one last question here. Get everybody's feedback. So now, what do you see that's exciting about moving to the cloud? And these are some ideas, some of the common things that we had out there. So what are some things that you think sound good? All right. Waiting for maybe one more. There we go. Looks like got our answers in. So people like the scalability, and I think that is definitely, I've really, that whole idea of a utility that you can turn off and turn on is really a pretty powerful one. The other, ease of access, always having software updates. That is definitely one of those positives that are out there. All right. So Jen, you want to talk any more about some of our points here we have of how we start the discussion, and we are running towards the end of our time. So
I noticed that. Save the best for last, right? I'll be really quick. As you can see on the screen, call us when you want to talk about it. If you have questions, you're not sure if you want to move or not, definitely get a hold of us, your account manager, your technical project manager. Some of the things that we'll want to know and is important when talking about shifting to the cloud and starting that discussion is, the quantity of users that we're moving, the different connected devices or software that we utilize within GainSeeker, scheduled tasks. If you're using them, what are they doing? What are we connecting to? Any special customizations that we may have done or that GainSeeker is doing for your organization, and whether that you want to be self-managed, meaning, it's a cloud of your choice, you're purchasing it, we're just going to help support, put it on there, or hosted, meaning that we'll lift and shift and we'll use our V2 hosting services, and, it's all on us to manage and create your users and make sure everything is okay. So those are the things to start thinking about. And even though we said, maybe 5 years on down the road, but some of these things do take a little bit of time, and depending on how big your organization is, to actually go ahead and have a successful move. So.
Okay, good. All right, well, thank you, Jen, and thanks to all of you for joining us here. We are kind of out of time. We can hang around here just another couple minutes if you have any other questions. We take July off traditionally for Tech Tips Live, figuring that hopefully everybody's enjoying some time away from work a little bit. I know a lot of us are here in the next few weeks as well. August 19th will be our next one, and we're going to talk about low code, no code customizations. And so kind of getting beyond some of the higher level Python to what are some of the simpler things that you can do with GainSeeker that are some of the everyday possibilities out there. So if I don't have any other questions, I don't know, Jen, Ian, either of you have any last words before we wrap up?
No, I think Jen's ending is perfect.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining us on this month's Tech Tips Live. Hope to see you back in a couple of months as we get going again for our fall season. We will have those links posted on our website pretty soon, and the plan is to probably switch off of Ring Central to using Microsoft Teams. So we'll have a little bit of a different interface again, and a little bit of work to figure out exactly how to publish those links. But look forward to seeing you in August. Have a great rest of the day, great Friday, and a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for joining us.